Good evening, I'm Maham Tawa with the news-making headlines around the world. The State of Kuwait hosts the 20th meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council Ministers of Culture. Fighting continues in Ain al-Arab as Kurdish fighters claim IS militants are driven out of most of the Syrian town. Al-Qaeda militants seize control of a town in southwest Yemen hours after Houthi rebels overrun a nearby city. And Hong Kong's chief executive says his government is ready for new talks with student protesters as early as next week. In our first item, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah received cables of congratulations from the GCC Information Ministers on the occasion of the 22nd GCC Information Ministers meeting recently held in Kuwait. In their cables, the GCC Ministers expressed sincere congratulations to His Highness the Emir on his UN nomination as humanitarian leader and of Kuwait as a humanitarian center, affirming that this unprecedented gesture of the UN reflects Kuwait's solid stances on the humanitarian and development levels, wishing His Highness the Emir everlasting health and wishing Kuwait further progress and prosperity under his wise leadership. In a special event, His Highness Sheikh Jabal Mbarak Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, inaugurated the National Library of Kuwait in the presence of the GCC Ministers of Culture. Various Kuwaiti organizations participated in the ceremony with booths showcasing rare books, scripts and maps. Other booths included the history of Kuwait, old Islamic books and scripts, ancient holy Qur'ans, Arabic poetry, formative arts, stamps, letters and old Kuwaiti and Arabian Gulf books. Heba Abdurrahman was there and has this report.
The National Library of Kuwait witnessed its official opening in an event attended and held under the patronage of His Highness the Prime Minister Sheikh Jabal Mbarak Al-Hamad Al-Sabah. This ceremony was also attended by several ministers, including First Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister Sheikh Subah Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, State Minister for Cabinet Affairs and Acting Minister of Justice Sheikh Mohammed Al-Abdullah Sabah, Information Minister, State Youth Minister and President of the National Council for Culture, Arts and Letters Sheikh Salman Subah Salim Mahmoud Al-Sabah. Also, the visiting Gulf Cooperation Council Chief Abdul Latif Al-Zayani was attending in addition to GCC heads of culture and media bodies and many academics and local literary personalities in the country. The opening of the library forms part of the nation's cultural development plans conducted under the directions of His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, His Highness the Crown Prince and His Highness the Prime Minister. It represents a cultural and human legacy that has traveled through the history of the country. Its contents and database are the result of the Kuwaiti society's culture, thought and art, and it looks forward to cooperate with its counterparts across the Gulf. The event went on to pay homage to local poets, writers, dramatists and artists, past and present, for their outstanding contributions in their respective disciplines, handing those present each with an award. The operational opening ceremony of the National Library of Kuwait today coincided with the 20th preparatory meeting of the GCC Ministers of Culture that recently took place in the country. From the National Library of Kuwait, this is Heba Abdurrahman reporting for English News.
The First Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister Sheikh Subah Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah received credentials of the newly appointed Hungarian ambassador to Kuwait, Mikhail Bayer. The credentials ceremony was attended by the Foreign Under-Secretary Khalid Sleiman Al-Jarallah, Director of the First Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister's Office, Ambassador Sheikh Dr. Ahmed Nasser Al-Mohammed Al-Sabah, and Director of the Protocol Department, Ambassador Dari Ashran Al-Ashran. The Deputy Premier, Minister of Interior and Acting Minister of Awqaf and Islamic Affairs, Sheikh Mohammed Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Subah, met this morning at his office with the Deputy Chief of Intelligence Agency of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Prince Dr. Abdulaziz bin Badr Al Saud, and his accompanying security delegation. Both sides discussed issues of common concern as well as the latest local and international developments, praising the depth of bilateral relations and fruitful cooperation between both countries. The meeting was attended by the Assistant Under-Secretary of the Foreign Security Agency, Sheikh Mbarak Salim Al-Ali, the Assistant Under-Secretary of the Internal Security Agency, Lieutenant General Ibrahim Al-Wasmi, and Director General of the General Information Department, General Aysam Salim Al-Naham. The Deputy Premier, Minister of Interior and Acting Minister of Awqaf and Islamic Affairs, Sheikh Mohammed Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Subah, met this morning at his office with Kuwait's ambassador to Iraq, Ghassan Al-Zawawi, where they discussed security issues in line with serving the interests of both countries. During the 20th meeting of the GCC Ministers of Culture that kicked off in Kuwait today, the Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs, Sheikh Salman Subah Salim Mahmoud Al-Subah, conveyed the greetings of His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Subah Al-Ahmad Al-Jabir Al-Subah, His Highness the Crown Prince, Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmad Al-Jabir Al-Subah, and His Highness Sheikh Jabir Al-Mbarak Al-Hamad Al-Subah, the Prime Minister, to the attendees, and wished them a pleasant stay in Kuwait. Sheikh Salman Al-Subah then voiced hope that this meeting will result in productive outcome that help accomplish the cultural goals of the GCC people and the desired objectives of their Majesties and Highnesses leaders of the GCC countries. Moreover, the Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs said the GCC Ministers of Culture are of one mind on promoting good citizenship among GCC populations through holding joint cultural activities to enable GCC youth in particular to be aware of their cultural heritages. The Kuwaiti minister expressed gratitude and appreciation to all those who participated in making this meeting a success, including the General Secretariat of the GCC and its Secretary General, Dr. Abdul Latif Al-Zayani. In return, Al-Zayani congratulated Kuwait's leadership and people on the establishment of Kuwait's National Library, emphasizing that it is a valuable GCC asset and a bright spot on the road for cultural integration among GCC communities. Intensified US-led airstrikes and a Kurdish military force on the ground had some success in halting advances by the Islamic State fighters on Ain al-Arab near Syria's border with Turkey. Kurdish militiamen were today continuing to fight the militants in the streets of the town. The Kurdish fighters have held out against IS militants a month into the group offensive on the frontier town, hanging on to their territory against all expectations. A Kurdish official told reporters that the IS group was driven out most of Ain al-Arab. Another Syrian Kurdish official called on the international community to allow weapons into the border town for the Kurdish fighters, saying the IS could bring in reinforcements and weapons at any time. He said airstrikes by the US-led coalition were not enough. Ten Palestinians were arrested and at least 4 were injured in clashes with Israeli forces in the old city of Jerusalem yesterday, as the occupation forces tried to disperse a peaceful protest against the strict Israeli restrictions on access of Palestinian worshippers to Al-Aqsa Mosque. From Ramallah, Fatma Abdul Karim has the details.
Israeli authorities arrested 10 Palestinians and injured no less than 4 during clashes that were sparked with Palestinian youth following the Israeli forces' attempts to disperse Palestinian protesters who took the streets against the imposed Israeli restrictions and banning of Palestinian worshippers from accessing Al-Aqsa Mosque, while leaving it open for storms by Jewish settlers.
Israel is waging war on all Muslims in the world by making such incursions, opening the door for groups of settlers to invade Al-Aqsa and discredit it. It should be held responsible for the results.
The clashes had spread into different neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, such as Al-Aisawiyeh, Jabal al-Mukabbir, and the alleys of the Old City, where the Israeli police used stun grenades against the youth and carried on with its arrests and beating.
Israeli soldiers provoked us and attacked the youth. And personally, I was attacked by 2 soldiers when I tried to defend a fellow student from being beaten, and I was hit on my head.
Palestinians say the Israeli restrictions and banning of Palestinians to enter Al-Aqsa compound is a form of racism. Witnesses and news reports have shown that dozens of settlers were allowed to enter the compound to perform their religious rituals.
The right-wing racist Israeli government and its extremist settler parties feel that they can in fact change the facts on the ground and erase the history of the Holy Land.
The Palestinian Authority described the Israeli actions as intentional provocations that aim to trigger the explosive situation into a new cycle of violence away from peace, and called on the international community to intervene to put an end to the Israeli oppressive measures against Palestinian worshippers and the incursions of the Holy Aqsa Mosque. Palestinians are warning that the Israeli authorities are pushing the situation to the edge, leaving them with no options except to resume their efforts at the United Nations, which seems to be the only weapon Palestinians have in the face of the Israeli war machine. Fatma Abdul Karim, Kuwait TV, Ramallah, Palestine.
A security official said today suspected Al-Qaeda militants seized control of a town in southwest Yemen hours after Houthi rebels overran a nearby provincial capital. 5 policemen were killed in the overnight offensive by militants on the town of Odain, west of the now rebel-controlled Ib. Houthi rebels seized more territory south of the capital, including Ib. Witnesses said that dozens of cars carrying Houthi fighters were seen arriving in Ib, an area bordering Al-Bayda province, a stronghold of Al-Qaeda. The Houthis, who took over Sana'a on September the 21st and who have held the strategic southern port of Hudaitha since Tuesday, did not face any opposition from local authorities as they entered the provinces of Damar and Ib, setting up checkpoints. Hong Kong's leader said today he was ready to start talks as soon as next week with students, leaders of the pro-democracy protests that have rocked the city for nearly 3 weeks. Chief Executive Leung Chun-Yang said officials had been indirectly negotiating with the students in the past few days, and authorities were now ready to hold talks on democratic reform. Today's announcement suggests a breakthrough in a bitter standoff between the authorities and pro-democracy protesters. The protesters have taken over major roads and streets in the city center since September the 28th to press for a greater say in choosing the city's leader.
Over the last few days, including this morning, through third parties, we expressed the wish to the students that we'd like to start the dialogue to discuss universal coverage as soon as we can, and hopefully within the following week. So as long as the students or other sectors in Hong Kong are prepared to focus on this issue, yes, we're ready, but we're prepared to start a dialogue and maintain that dialogue.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel arrived in Milan today to attend a 2-day meeting of European and Asian leaders, which will focus on economic and political issues. Merkel said the leaders will discuss issues of global importance which are relevant to both Asia and Europe, including the economy and other new developments around the world. 27 European heads of state and the European Commission are attending the meeting, along with 16 Asian leaders, plus the ASEAN Secretariat and new entrants Australia, New Zealand and Russia. Discussions will mainly focus on how European and Asian nations can cooperate and strengthen their relations in the areas of economic growth and security. Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in Serbia today for talks that are expected to focus on economic issues and energy. The talks include construction of the South Stream gas pipeline that has been opposed by the European Union. Although Serbian officials said they respect Ukraine's territorial integrity and did not support Russia's annexation of Crimea, they have refused to impose sanctions against Russia. Instead, Serbia is hoping to capitalize on Russia's counter-ban on Western goods by signing deals with Putin that would increase its food exports to Russia. Putin is expected to pressure Serbia to start building the Moscow-controlled gas pipeline, which would bypass Ukraine and transport Russian gas to the heart of Europe. European Union health ministers arrived in the Belgian capital Brussels today for high-level talks on what measures the member states should introduce at the borders to effectively screen passengers coming into Europe from Ebola-affected countries. Speaking to reporters ahead of the meeting, Italian Health Minister Beatrice Lorenzen, who chairs the Brussels meeting, said a set of airport screening measures, part of an effort to stop the spread of Ebola, would be proposed and discussed at the meeting. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization, the WHO, said a major outbreak of Ebola in the US and elsewhere in the West is unlikely given the strong health systems. US President Barack Obama also said the risk of Americans getting the virus was extremely low, although he ordered a more aggressive response to the outbreak. The Assistant Executive Director for the World Food Programme, Elizabeth Rasmussen, is on a special visit to Kuwait to attend a meeting for main Syria donor countries and agencies. The World Food Programme is the world's largest humanitarian agency fighting hunger worldwide. In emergencies, it delivers food to where it is needed, saving the lives of victims of war, civil conflict and natural disasters. After the cause of an emergency passes, it uses food to help communities rebuild their shattered lives. Stay tuned to Hiba Abdurrahman's interview with Ms. Rasmussen in the following report.
WFP is part of the United Nations system and is voluntarily funded. Born in 1961, WFP pursues the vision of the world in which every man, woman and child has access at all times to the food needed for an active and healthy life. WFP works towards that vision with UN agencies in Rome, the Food and Agriculture Organization FAO, and the International Fund for Agricultural Development IFAD, as well as other government, UN and NGO partners. On this occasion of holding a meeting for main Syria donor countries and agencies in Kuwait, the Assistant Executive Director for the World Food Programme, Elizabeth Rasmussen, recently visited Kuwait.
The purpose of my visit this time is to participate in the Humanitarian Partnership Conference that I find very interesting and very useful. And of course, it's not only the conference, listening to people and discussing issues, but it's also having the opportunity to meet with Kuwaiti government officials, Kuwaiti NGOs, to meet with the Red Crescent, and to have an opportunity to create new partnerships. I'm also very pleased to come here and meet my Kuwaiti colleague, who is in our office here for the first time.
On average, WFP reaches more than 80 million people with food assistance in 75 countries each year. About 11,500 people work for the organization, most of them in remote areas directly serving the hungry poor.
The World Food Programme is the largest humanitarian organization in the world. We are operating in 75 countries, covering the whole globe, but most of our operations are in Africa, and now of course also in the Middle East. We are very big. We have around 14,000 staff working, and the World Food Programme, as the title is saying, we are the United Nations Food Agency. We feed people. We feed around 80 million people every year.
WFP's strategic plan lays out 4 objectives: save lives and protect livelihoods in emergencies, support food security and nutrition and rebuild livelihoods in fragile settings and following emergencies, reduce risk and enable people, communities and countries to meet their own food and nutrition needs, and reduce undernutrition and break the intergenerational cycle of hunger. From the Regency Hotel, I am Hiba Abdulrahman reporting for English News.
Finally, moving to the local financial news, where the main indices of Kuwait Stock Exchange settled in the red zone upon closing of today's session. The KSX 15 index lost 3.2 points to reach 195.58 points. The weight index settled at 487.69, that's down by 3.83 points, and the price index reached 7,410.34, that's losing 131.22 points. Meanwhile, the number of trades reached 5,935 transactions, worth about 39 million Kuwaiti dinars, with around 270 million shares changing hands. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. Well, with that, we conclude our news bulletin. Thank you for joining us. Have a pleasant time. I'm Maham Tawa. Before we go, we remind you once again of our main top stories. Have a pleasant time and good night. The State of Kuwait hosts the 20th meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council Ministers of Culture. Fighting continues in Ain al-Arab as Kurdish fighters claim IS militants are driven out of most of the Syrian town. Al-Qaeda militants seized control of a town in southwest Yemen hours after Houthi rebels overrun a nearby city. And Hong Kong's chief executive says his government is ready for new talks with student protesters as early as next week.